Bonjour, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you're in the country. My name is Mirthad Hariri, and I'm the CEO and President of the Canadian Science Policy Centre. First, allow me to acknowledge the land that I'm talking to you from Newmarket, Ontario, the traditional land and unceded territory of the Indigenous peoples, including Wenda, Haudenosaunee, and Anishinaabe peoples. I recognize their stewardship of the land, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to live and work here. Welcome to everyone to yet another panel session of the series on geopolitical shift and Canada's innovation strategy. We at the Canadian Science Policy Centre convened a fascinating group of industry leaders to tackle an urgent question, and that is how can Canada build an innovation strategy that is in this changing world. Prime Minister in the UN a couple of days ago called it a rupture time. The geopolitical landscape is unsettled, but the moments of disruption are also moments of opportunity. If we get the policy, investment, collaboration, and government aligned, Canada has a chance to not just keep the pace, but also set pace. Among the questions we will consider for the panel are that currently hindering innovation. How can policy support the private sector research and development, and what emerging global or domestic opportunity can Canada uniquely exploit in this period of sudden transformation or rupture time? This year, we have been organizing a series of panels with leaders of industry from across the country for various sectors. Some of you may have participated in the previous panel sessions on agri-food sector, life sciences sector. Today is advanced manufacturing, and there will be two more, one on natural resources on October 9th, and another one on digital and high-tech on October 23rd. Today, we have an impressive line of panelists, both from industry associations as well as the business leaders, to discuss this issue from the perspective of advanced manufacturing. The recording of this session will be posted online, and the AI session as well will be posted, plus a human intelligence synthesized report of all the sessions will be prepared and posted. Remind you that there will be an innovation policy symposium that will discuss these sessions and the recommendations from industry leaders further on the Symposium of Innovation Policy on November 19 as part of the annual Science Policy Conference. The early bird is in effect until October 1st. Please make sure that you register for the conference. And I want to thank the speakers of this panel who agreed to be with us for the next 90 minutes or so. And of course, I want to introduce the moderator today, Rhonda Barnett, who kindly accepted to moderate this session. Rhonda is a senior advisor to Avid Manufacturing, a family-owned automation and engineering company. She helped grow into a global supplier for leading multinationals, including GE and Siemens. She previously served as the president and COO. She led the company through the expansion of international growth and digital transformation, and has a few decades of experience in the sector. Thank you very much, Rhonda, for being with us. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much for the warm introduction, Mirdad. And thank you also to the Canadian Science Policy Centre for allowing us to have the stage today to really bring forward the conversation around our sector and the policy drivers for us to succeed at this moment. So I'm extremely delighted to be moderating this important conversation on the future of advanced manufacturing in Canada. For those of you who know me, it's very near and dear to me. I take this everywhere I go in the world. This is a vital sector to this country. Manufacturing is a vital contributor to the Canadian economy. It accounts for about 10% of GDP, and it employs over 1.7 million people, which is about 10% of the workforce, and it supports even millions more jobs indirectly. It's a really vital sector in Canada. The sector is a major driver of exports and innovation, creating high-value products and fostering the development of a highly skilled workforce, which is another file that's near and dear. Uh, for over 300 years, manufacturing has been a constant driver of prosperity and competitiveness in our nation. But now we face a new era, one defined by geopolitical shifts, tariffs, and fractured supply chains. Prime Minister Carney's recent announcements on nation-building projects signal the scale of opportunity in critical minerals, clean energy, and infrastructure. Yet to seize these opportunities, our sector must overcome obstacles. Tariffs and protectionism are raising costs. Too many of our firms lag in adopting digital technologies, and chronic skills and R&D investment gaps are holding back our competitiveness. So this panel today will explore how government and industry can respond strategically by aligning policy and fostering cross-sector collaboration and boosting investment, while also identifying the unique opportunities Canada can leverage in this period of transformation. So I look forward to hearing from our panelists on how we can navigate this new landscape together and position Canadian advanced manufacturing, as Mirdad said, not just to adapt, but to lead. So that's what we're here to talk about today. So let me now introduce the esteemed panelists. I'm very privileged to be joined by two senior executives from national associations and three executives from large multinational manufacturing innovators in Canada. So let me make some brief introductions and then we're going to get right into it. So first we have Francois Desmarais, who is the Vice President of Trade and Industry Affairs for the Canadian steel producers. I bet you he's been very busy lately.
Thanks for having me.
Next, we have Tara Cregan. Tara is the Engineering Director of General Motors of Canada Limited and has a really vast career with General Motors and the innovation taking place in this country through General Motors.
Good afternoon, and thank you.
Thanks, Tara. Next, we have Ryan Greer. Ryan is the Senior Vice President of Public Affairs and National Policy for the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters. Welcome, Ryan.
Hi, Rhonda.
And next, we have Amy McLeod. Amy is the Vice President of Corporate Communications for MDA Space. And she likes the space in behind me. So welcome, Amy.
Behind you, well done. Hello,
And a
everyone.
very, very impressive resume. Next, we have Jay Judkowitz, and Jay is the Director of Product and Engineering for Rockwell Automation's Autonomous Mobile Robot, the AMR group. So welcome, Jay. So we have a great panel here. So let's dig into it. We're really going to focus on four central themes. We want to look at the problem statement for this sector in Canada. Then we're going to look at the innovative companies and talk about some of the challenges and the ideas to capitalize in this moment to drive innovation. And then we're going to close really looking kind of to the future and hear what we can do in this moment to really double down. So let's start with the problem statement. I'm going to ask Francois and Ryan to respond to this, and then the other panelists can chime in. We're going to take about 15 minutes here. Francois, we'll start with you, but let's lay the groundwork on the problem statement here. Let's look at, what are the issues that are facing this sector right now? I think we understand them, but maybe you can bring a specific reference to from the steel producers today, the Canadian steel producers. So let's look at the geopolitical shift, the tariffs, and all of this uncertainty in our economy that's impacting your association, your members.
Yeah, thanks, Rhonda. I think it's a good place to start when you talk about manufacturing or different Canadian sector and industry. We're a trading nation. We depend on access to market, and of course, the U.S. market is by far the largest market that we have for our producers, especially steel industry. Back in January, 94% of all our export were going to the U.S. and representing 50% of our production. So $10 billion annually in sales to the US. And with US trade policy being changing by the minute, I would say. It has really brought a lot of unpredictability for our producers and a lot of uncertainty for the economy in a whole. Yes, we represent 23,000 direct jobs in the sector in Canada, but if you include all the indirect jobs, you add 100,000 jobs that are at risk because of losing access to the US market. So the current unpredictability on the trade sector has really put a dent not only in our sales book, but also in how we can pivot and survive the current challenge posed to the trade order that we knew. We know we have been resilient. We've been in operation for over 100 years in the country, but we know that the current change in the trade environment will mean a lot of sacrifice, also a lot of difficulties. But we know that we can, and we have this capability and resiliency to change our model. We can be innovative in a sense of we can onshore and reshore our activities and better serve our own Canadian market. The beauty of the steel market in Canada is that we import way more than we export. So there's a capacity here in Canada for our sector through innovation, again, to pivot from dependency on the US market back to our own Canadian market. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be difficult. Yes, we don't manufacture necessarily everything that we consume, but we know that for 82% of all the imports of steel in Canada, we have Canadian capabilities. So while we are reorganizing our supply chain, while we are expanding, broadening our customer base in the country, we have to do it at a pace and a speed that has never been possible before. But we have to do it because this is the survival of our industry.
Okay, I bet you have a lot of sleepless nights these days, Francois. Let's turn it over now to Ryan to give a perspective from the Canadian manufacturers who are kind of looking across the entire sector, across the entire country. And I'm sure you bring a lot of challenges, and I'm sure you have a lot of sleepless nights as well, Ryan.
Yeah, but part of that has to do with my young children as well. So I won't put it all on trade and tariffs. Well, thanks for the question, and thanks to CSPC for including CME in this discussion. Just to give you a little context on sort of our perspective or my perspective, for those of you that may not know us, we are Canadian manufacturers and exporters, one of the trade associations in the country. I believe this is year 154, of which I've been privileged to participate in approximately 2 of since I've joined the organization, and joined and jumped in on some of these interesting economic challenges. I think at a pretty interesting time. I think Francois did a really good job of sort of outlining some of the immediate threat facing our steel producers, and there's obviously other manufacturers who are facing Section 232 tariffs from automotive and auto parts, and obviously there's a knockdown effect that impacts the broader manufacturing sector. Contextually, I think it's also important as we have sort of headed into this very challenging year, is that there have been some sort of strong headwinds that the manufacturing sector more broadly has been fighting for an extended period of time, long predating our current trade challenges. And so, when you look, all those figures you outlined, it's an incredibly important part of our economy, supporting so many jobs and families. But at the same time, like when we look at business investment per worker, it's nearly half of US levels as it is in Canada. Over the last decade, we've seen a slide in Canada's sort of overall rankings and in various competitiveness rankings. Our labor productivity is almost 30% lower than the US. And a lot of this is because, of course, the US is both the biggest advantage, and as we're discovering, sort of the biggest vulnerability of the Canadian economy. There's no doubt, being that close to one of the largest and certainly the richest consumer market in the world, and one of the most strongest manufacturing powerhouses in the world, has been a tremendous advantage. And when you look at our exports to the US, it's important to note that these are not finished products. If you were to look at, I don't know, Korea's exports to the US, we're talking about finished cars, finished televisions, consumer products. whereas almost 4/5 of what Canada sells ingredients, parts, and components into U.S. manufacturing process, vice versa, what they sell to us. But some of the long-term consequences of that have begun to been laid bare, not just this year, but previously. So some of what we've sort of seen in how Canada's lagging productivity, I think, has to do with our proximity to that market, and certainly industry has some level of fault to bear with this. Being so close to such a market maybe means that we've underinvested, we've taken for granted. We haven't had to compete as aggressively as if we didn't have that kind of access to the US market. And then, of course, having that access directly limited through unjustified tariff actions has further sort of exacerbated this challenge. So, I guess that's all the bad news, which is some bad long-term trends, some really difficult short-term trends. But I think as Francois started to illustrate, and I think where we're going to get a chance to explore in the next hour, there's a tremendous amount of opportunity, even some low-hanging fruit when it comes to how do we strengthen our manufacturing sector, how do we seize more global and North American opportunities, how do we sell more within our own country, and what we can do to strengthen the sector to the benefit of all Canadians. So, notwithstanding all the gloom and doom, there's a lot of opportunity if we can start to get some of the decisions right across government, within industry, and through other stakeholders and partners, so I'm excited to hear from our other panelists today and dig into this.
No, that's great. I'm wondering, I know my own manufacturing company is looking at a project that involves Canadian steel for the domestic market of a product that's currently being produced in the US for the Canadian market. What are we seeing nationally? Are we seeing companies really dig into some of these opportunities right now? Are you seeing that, is that shift happening or it's about to happen?
Yeah, maybe I'll jump in quick and then I'll turn it back over to Francois, and he can comment very directly on the steel. Yes, it's happening by force, but it's happening at a scale that has to be sort of considered relative to how our economy is structured, which is to say, it has been decades of Canada-US integration. We have built north-south supply chains. All of our major transportation and export infrastructure goes north-south. It is deeply, deeply integrated, so much so that the border exists. But if you look at, again, all those parts and ingredients and components in the Great Lakes region, or even between companies in British Columbia and the West Coast of the United States, it's just one united manufacturing sector. And so, question of diversification or new opportunities, it will happen. It is happening. Companies are looking for new customers. They're looking to rethink and remake their supply chain. But of the US market, and again, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars of investment that have been made on both sides of the border to build a system that exists as it is. Our ability to effectively sort of pivot and remake and rethink is going to be a long journey. It is going to take a lot of time. And, the only way we're going to fix our US problem is not through diversification or even buying or selling within Canada. That's going to help offset it. But the only way to fix your US problem is to fix your US problem. So there is a lot of opportunity, and we're hearing from a lot of members that are rethinking their supply chains and their customers and looking for new opportunities. But I think we need to, at the macro level, really moderate our expectations about what is possible in the short, medium, and even long term to extract ourselves from this level of dependence and integration with the US.
I think Ryan will be reassured that I'm not going to contradict anything that he has said. Like, I fully support what he said. Through the integration as we're in our steel sector, we're the largest exporter of steel to the US, and they are the largest exporter to us. And a lot of our members are companies that are operating on both sides of the border. And it only made sense for them in business sense to focus some product line in one side of the border and to supply both sides of the full America region. So they were more competitive and facing also imports from offshore. Unfortunately, and this is not my choice and it's not the choice of our members, but we're going back to a deshoring or a decoupling from the US. So going back to my earlier comments, we already produce in Canada about 82% of in total volume of the consumption of steel, of the product we make in this country. So we have this capability to offset and replace some of the offshore steel we had coming in with product and capabilities we have. So of course we have to reach those new customer or to rekindle with those old customer from before. And honestly, it has been positive to some extent because we see a lot of manufacturers coming to us and asking a member, and they want to source in Canada and they're still from Canada because they understand that our survival also means their survival and them striving if they return to Canadian goods or inputs into their supply chain. But like Ryan said, it's not going to happen overnight. So we have this momentum right now, and we're feeling the support from Canadian manufacturing, and we're grateful for that. But what are we going to do for the 20% of the steel that we still consume that for which we need to import that we cannot just manufacture today or tomorrow? Well, we're also grateful for some of the action that the Canadian government has taken and announced some measures to help, for instance, our producers to retool some of the operation to reacquire some of those capability and products that and producing products that we gave up years ago because there's some economic sense to really produce everything we consume because they're probably not a market or a business case to be made, but there's some retooling. Some of our members are really interested in getting into new product segment that we gave up years ago because we know that what's going on the broader trade environment globally are there to stay. So it's going to make sense, coupled with different policy and different support program from the government to, maybe look at opportunity to diversify our offering and actually also serve better our Canadian market.
Rhonda, I just want to pick up quickly on something Francois said, and then you may want to open it up to some of the other panelists, which, referencing government decision making, I think that's really important. So, we're talking about the context of Canada-US trade challenges. We, of course, do not control what the administration decides to do. We can try to influence, and certainly the government and the private sector are trying to influence how they think about Canada-US trade and our relationship, but we do not control those decisions. However, there are a bunch of things that we do control, and maybe we'll have a chance to dive into this through the hour, which is what is our domestic policy environment around tax, around regulation. You referenced C5 and major projects. I think that's a small step in the right direction around all the things that we can do, notwithstanding the current trade challenges, to incentivize investment that is sorely needed. And I think we're at a moment, and I hope this momentum continues, where all levels of government, not just the federal government, but provincial governments and even municipalities, need to look at all the policy levers under their control and do everything that they can to make investment, whether it be from firms already operating here, FDI, or other sources, undeniable. We need to look at everything we can do to attract as much capital over the short, medium, and long term as we possibly. And I think, to go back to what I said earlier, I think our proximity to the U.S. market and the beneficial access we've enjoyed to that market has maybe left governments a little lazy on some of these questions around what needs to be done to incentivize investment. And so I think now is the time, and we're hoping that industry and government can come together to really identify not just one or two things, but what is everything that we need to be doing to really get serious about this. And then that also solves a bunch of other challenges around budgetary deficits and spending on social programs and other things that are just a net good for the economy. So I think there is lots of opportunity if we can start to get some of these decisions right.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for that conversation. I'm going to, the other questions, I'm going to throw it open to the rest of the panel, but this sort of opening one, I was going to leave it to the associations to provide that overview. I think we've got three large multinationals here that operate in Canada and the and it's important that they manage all of their issues as a multinational, trying to do good things in Canada and the US. And so I will move on to the next question and really start to focus in on these companies. So I'd like to next hear from Amy and Jay. And so the next question is really, looking into these challenges from a company perspective, how should the government and then industry respond to these challenges to enable long-term innovation and competitiveness? What is it that you're needing and looking for to be sustainable and competitive? So let's turn it over first to Amy.
Thank you, Rhonda, and thank you to the Canadian Science Policy Centre for hosting this conversation. I think if I can look at a bright side of the year that we are living, it is that it has forced conversations and a speed of dialogue and action that hasn't happened in a very long time. And so in that context, I'm Amy McLeod. I'm with MDA Space. That's Canada's largest space technology company. Heritage company, 60 years, almost 60 years now in Canada, building technology for space. That's our full market. Very much a manufacturing environment. We've got about 2,000 folks at our facility in Montreal that design, test, and manufacture digital satellites for communications. And another large manufacturing facility in Brampton, where we build our robotics. Space robotics, including Canadarm and the commercial derivative SkyMaker for space agencies and space companies globally. So very much, this has been a year where we really needed to think about strategy, where we needed to think about markets, where we needed to think about diversification, and we needed to think about investment, capital investment in manufacturing in order to offer competitive. It's always world leading, because I think there's some things in Canada we do extremely well. I'm going to say manufacturing is one of them. And so when we think about this moment that we're in, and what is it at the macro national level are our competitive differentiations, I would say manufacturing. As you said, it's always been core to our economy and to our quality of life and to job creation. And so let's just identify it as a competitive advantage for Canada. I think space also is one. We don't talk about it a lot, but we've been in this game. We were the third country in space right after the US and what was then the USSR and Canada. And so, and a host of others. So and steel, I am a child of Northern Ontario. Algoma Steel is near and dear to me, grew up with it. These things that are core to us, like we need to start talking about what are those core markets that we have natural competitive advantage in. And there's a long list. Alluded a little bit. So that's the first piece. The second piece I wanted to talk about a little bit is making sure that we are continuing to invest in advanced manufacturing, which is an easy thing to say, and of course requires all that capital that Ryan's talking about, right? We have to put money in order to remain competitive, in order to leverage the tools that are available today for manufacturing. We're doing it at MDA Space. We started to do it 4 or 5 years ago in advance, obviously, of the scenario that we find ourselves in today, because there was a market for it, because it needed to happen in order for us to remain competitive. We're just in the process of finishing a project where we're doubling our capacity at our satellite facility in Montreal. That'll be completed before the end of this year and operational early next year. And that's really harnessing what is modern manufacturing, advanced modern manufacturing, cobots, AI, machine learning, all of the tools that we have with our very highly technicians and engineers to build a product line that is competitive globally. And I would say at this particular moment, leading the world in terms of satellite manufacturing. And so looking to find those places where we can really harness investment to not just maintain, but maybe even extend global leadership in advanced manufacturing environments. Investment is key. Investment in innovation, and when I say innovation, I mean not just the product lines, but the advanced manufacturing capacity and capabilities to deliver those product lines. And so that's what we've been doing. I agree with Ryan and Francois. It's been a tough year. This is not easy to navigate. You wake up one morning and what you thought was a solid, diversified business plan shape changes, and so we're blocking and tackling, and as everyone is right now, to keep the ship moving forward and keep focused on what was our strategy 3 or 4 years ago with investment, but with investment in innovation, including in manufacturing. So maybe I'll stop there and turn it over to Jay.
Thanks, Amy. Jay?
Thanks so much, Amy. So I'm not the person to say how we break down barriers to trade with some markets, but I do have some thoughts on what we could do as a country in order to be the best possible producers for our own industries and for new markets across the globe. First area is education. We definitely want to invest in STEM and modernize the university track to include more about robotics, more about artificial intelligence, and all of the theoretical studies that underpin those technologies so that we could be leaders in what basically what builds all the advanced manufacturing technology. But not just the university track, we have to look at the college and trade school track, right? And make sure that people who are going to be working in factories are coming out of their trade schools and colleges with exposure to the technologies they'll be using in the coming decades. That we need to invest in is industrial policy. I think like everybody's noting, we want to bring manufacturing home. We want to find ways to incentivize expanded industrial production in Canada. But it's not just a matter of building more factories and trying to run them the way they used to get run. We have to encourage automation in Canadian industry. Study after study shows that Canadian manufacturers are far behind other manufacturers in adopting robots. Our robot to worker ratio is about as low as anywhere in the industrialized world. So we need business incentives to change this trend. And this is important because everybody's been talking about the challenges from tariffs, but the other big challenge is the introduction of low-cost competitive products from China and other places. So only by adopting automation are we going to be able to lower costs, increase business continuity in the face of unpredictable events like COVID. This was what will allow us to open more plants, manufacture more goods, more places across the country, including in rural communities with smaller workforces that are looking for new economic opportunities. Also in industrial policy, we definitely want to make sure we're not forgetting unions. Government, industry, and unions need to collaborate on a worker-focused automation path. Among other things, it involves worker training on automation, retraining for roles that get automated away, and understanding the benefits of automation. Safety is a really big example. While an individual forklift driver might initially resist movement into a new role, all of the line workers around that forklift driver now get the benefit of dramatically improved physical safety. And so we really want to make sure people are understanding the benefits and being trained on what changes. And then, all these changes need to be managed so that workers can't be left behind. And the thing is, I've talked with some unions. Some unions are actually very forward-looking, and they're looking to partner on this. They're not looking to be obstructionist in any way. I think also we can incentivize entrepreneurship. We actually have a great social support system that risks where in other countries they might not be able to. We have an educated populace. We have a lot of VC money. We should be starting more companies in key areas like robotics and artificial intelligence. Now, to fuel all this, I think a third thing we need to do is lure more talent from abroad. And this is something I have some experience in. Almost 9 years ago, I chose to immigrate to Canada. And I can share a few things. First, mid-career professionals have a very, very hard time. The immigration system actually favors young students and top executives, but it doesn't have a great way of bringing in people that are in the prime of their career and are actually doing the work and have experience developing and implementing the technologies we need. And this is important because some elements of the Canadian tech scene are actually pretty underdeveloped, and we can augment that with talent from abroad. And once we've done those things to help lure that talent, we should actively market it. You see the medical industry doing this. Certain provinces are actually recruiting doctors from abroad. Lastly, I think there's a lot of things we need to do to improve the infrastructure. If we do increase the population through immigration, we need things like public transportation between population centers, financial centers, and tech hubs. We need more medical schools and step up recruiting of doctors from abroad and respecting their credentials, and build elementary schools. If you bring in all these professionals, they're going to start families, and we need places, not just infrastructure and housing, but also schools. So I know it's a long laundry list of things, but I think if we could do some or all of these things, it's really going to make it easier for us to do advanced manufacturing and be an economic powerhouse.
Well, that's great. And we'll get to a poll later to see, who's in the audience, but I think there's a large number of government officials on the audience today. And so I hope you're listening. I think, the conversation has been around for many decades around the fact that we need an innovation strategy for Canada that we can all see and understand. And I think Jay just laid out some, very important aspects of what that strategy could look like for this and other sectors to be successful. I'm going to put Ryan on the spot a little bit here. One thing that Jay talked about, and Ryan, you and I already talked about this, so don't worry too much, but there were a lot of announcements came out 2 or 3 weeks ago from the Prime Minister, in particular, the one around the Workforce Alliance for Advanced Manufacturing, and that would be involving unions and industry associations and industry, et cetera, to really tackle some of these challenges that Jay is talking about. So, Ryan, I wonder if you could maybe comment on that. Do you think that that as you know it right now is something that could fulfill the of what Rockwell Automation and others are looking for?
It certainly may, and I only say may because, of course, what the outcome and the output of some of these announcements are, and really will determine whether it will be successful or not. But at a high level, workforce is so critical, and I won't echo everything that Jay said in his prescription, except to note when we look at Canada's manufacturing sector, it skews older than all other sectors of the economy. And we are facing a huge wave of retirements, not in the long term or the medium term, but now, and over the next 4 years, there will be tens and tens of thousands of Canadians exiting manufacturing. And we as a sector need to work closely with governments and among ourselves to help fill those vacancies with young Canadians, with new Canadians, with women who are quite underrepresented in the sector. So that workforce piece is going to be really, really important. And it actually is a hinge point or lever to do all the other things that we need and want to do and fulfill some of the things that even Jay was talking about. So we don't have the people on the line operating the advanced technology, helping plants expand and having access to those necessary talent pools. We're going to continue to see what we've seen, which is reduced productivity and a number of challenges. So I would say on some of what we heard on the workforce side a couple weeks ago, I hope so, Rhonda, but the proof is always in the pudding. I mean, and I'm trying not to be cynical about this, but all levels of government are constantly, introducing and reintroducing and talking about new ways that they're going to help push through skills mismatch and retraining and all the other things. And all of that is useful, but we're still facing this real intense challenge going to create some problems. I mean, maybe one last thing I would note, I think there's going to be room for even more employer-led training as we go, as we approach the fraught months and years ahead. And one whole half of CME's business that I'm less connected to is employer training, lean training, yellow belt training. It is literally work on shop floors to help manufacturers, especially small and medium-sized manufacturers, continue to make incremental improvements to what they do and the way they operate. And we think there's lots of opportunity through us and other industry partners to scale up those activities so that employers and employer organizations can spend even more time on shop floors, working with their members and their employees to try to make their people more productive.
Thank you, Ryan. Is there anyone else that wanted to weigh in on that before we move to the next question, which is similar? We do know that. Tara?
I just want to weigh in on some key challenges and how we can address them. So I'm the manufacturing engineering director for the Oshawa assembly plant. So I'm not a policy expert and I don't claim to have a national view, but I can certainly share, my perspective on some of the challenges facing the automotive industry and our site here in particular. So a challenge for us is the unknowns right now around the EV glide path and defining that path forward. You may not know this, but GM is the #1 EV seller now in Canada, outperforming that other company that starts with the T. who shall remain nameless. But I think regardless of who the OEM is, there's uncertainty around, that market demand as well as future government mandates. And we had that original target for 2026 for 20% zero emission vehicle sales. And just this month, the federal government paused that mandate's implementation for 26. And also, I'd say that long-term vision for 2035 with that goal of 100% is now under review. So certainly working together and getting some clarity on that path forward would be helpful. And then the other thing specifically for automotive, we're not in a growth phase right now, at least in Canada. You, I'm sure, have all been reading the news, and for GM specifically, the Kami plant is currently idled, and we've announced a shift reduction for the Oshawa assembly plant. So we're going from a 3-shift to a 2-shift operation in January of 2026. So that presents obviously some challenges for us. So there's still a huge appetite for innovation. We're still making in our future here. We've got the next gen truck coming that's been announced. So we have that to look forward to. And the large scale automation is really essential to help us maintain that competitive advantage. But if you're asking how can government and industry respond, it is to help us continue to grow. And Jay, I really liked what you said about the investment in our talent here. We've got great colleges, great universities, great talent. Certainly we can attract the best international talent here as well. And Amy, I liked what you said about, investment in terms of just dollars, right? We really need that investment to help our industries continue to grow.
Yeah, thanks, Tara. It's a really great validation of the role of government. I mean, government is not responsible for making our sector more productive, but it is responsible for setting the conditions in Canada for us to grow and succeed. And so I think, looking for that clarity for the EV sector is a really big factor for a lot of organizations in Canada. I was formerly with the board of ESA as well around the regulation of electricity and the expansion that would come. So it's more than just the manufacturing sector that will be looking for clarity there. So if government's listening, we will be looking for setting those conditions and having the clarity to move forward. So the next question is similar, but it's we're really going to talk about R&D now. A topic near and dear to all of us and to the sector in particular, that this is a sector that really drives research and development. And maybe Ryan has the stats on that, but I think we're the biggest sector in Canada driving research and innovation. Yes. I couldn't put my CME hat back on to know what the exact, we'll maybe call on you for that. But, this is a sector known for its research and development. So how can Canada further enhance private sector R&D from organizations around the table to capitalize on emerging opportunities in the sector, like the EV challenge? So we're going to turn this one over to Tara and Amy. And maybe just before you speak, Ryan, if you could answer my question about this sector in terms of its share of R&D in the country.
Yeah, thanks, Rhonda. I believe it's 40 to 45% of all business R&D spending in Canada comes from the manufacturing sector. So it is by far the largest private sector contributor, and the most R&D intense sectors of the economy, of course, in manufacturing. So aerospace, automotive, pharmaceutical, ICT equipment, machinery. So you've got it. It's almost half.
Okay, great. Thank you. Maybe we'll kick it off with Amy, as we just heard from Tara, and then we're going to come back to you, Tara, from the aerospace sector. Amy, maybe you'd like to enlighten us on this issue.
Yeah, well, as Ryan just highlighted in the stats there, space, aerospace, where we fit, MDA space, highly R&D intensive manufacturing and engineering that happens in our world. And we do have, just again, to be fair and honest, we do have some good support in Canada that allows us to continue to make those investments. More of the same is at a baseline in terms of the incentives like SHRED and others that we certainly leverage. That's very helpful to us. In addition, just a couple of folks have commented on the government attendance. Some of the things that we are seeing that are positive, just because I think it's important to not just present the challenges, but the things that we're seeing that are positive. And Jay talked about industrial policy. Industrial policy, and Tara kind of alluded to this too, with, okay, we need clarity on what's going on with EVs right now, because as a private company, we need to know where we're going to put our money in order to meet the market and to compete successfully. Clarity on industrial policy and doing that quickly. I think what we see sometimes is really long-term 2 or 3 year cycles to develop industrial policy. We don't have that time. We have the speed of need right now, and we can do that when we need to. I think the pandemic really showed us what we can do as a country and as a business, government, collaboration entity when we need to. We need that right now too. Quick industrial policy that is clear and committed in order to know where we can take the risk to invest. And I would say on that front as well, because the word risk has come up a couple times in this conversation, we need to share the risk with our government partners. Too often we see an instinct for perfection, where what we have to commit to for government engagement, government policy needs to be locked down in a way that this world doesn't allow right now, and maybe never did. But we cannot do that in this environment. It needs to be shared risk. We need to be brave, both in the private sector and I would say in the public sector with our government partners, to make decisions with imperfect data at times, but to commit to them until for a period of time, so that we can comfortably make investment decisions about advanced manufacturing, about hiring, about investing in growth, about seeking new markets to diversify that revenue line. All of those things require a really profound level of engagement and shared risk that maybe we haven't really. We do it in the private sector because we have to, certainly in publicly traded. We balance all of those things. We manage our risk. We do all of those things. I think we need government partners who understand what risk is and how to share it. And that would be a conversation that's really needed in and around industrial policy. Again, back to one of the positives that we're seeing and a change that we're recognizing, just to identify it. We, MDA Space, certainly cover the gamut of civil space, commercial space, defense space. And we do see in Canada a motivation on the defense security sovereignty side right now, because there are drivers that require us to. We have NATO commitments. We always have, but we see a new commitment to meet those. That is the signal that we need to invest. Those types of things are not insignificant. And we're seeing that posture, at least right now. We need to convert that into contracts and programs and things that actually make it real. But those are the types of things that we need. So I talk about the speed of need, and we need that right now. We're seeing it. We're seeing the right signals. We're seeing early stage signs of it. But we really kind of have to shake ourselves out of the old way of thinking and doing, and the old pace of thinking and doing, in order to drive that change.
Well, thank you, Amy. Before I move on to Tara, I just want to remind our audience that there's a Q&A function. I think it's a button at the bottom of your screen. You're welcome to post your questions there, and I believe you can vote on them, and then we'll ask a few of those at the end. We are going to save about 20 minutes at the end to look at your questions and bring those forward to the panel. So please feel free to pop those in the Q&A portion. Okay, Tara, I know you've spent some time working at GM's R&D hub in Markham. I forget the official name of it, but I've been out there. It's a really interesting place. Autonomous vehicles and all kinds of really innovative things going on out there. I wonder if you could sort of bring a GM perspective to this conversation, as you're a big innovator in this country, of what Canada needs to be doing to really enhance private sector investment in R&D.
Okay, thank you, Rhonda. So I think I'm going to reinforce some of the points that have been previously stated. I absolutely think we need to foster a stronger industry, academic, government collaboration, and we'd benefit from more of those public-private partnerships, and that would allow us to embed R&D right into our requirements. Now, we do that somewhat on our own, so thank you for the shout out to the Canadian Technical Centre in Markham. So we do have technical centers, one in Markham, actually one also here in Oshawa, right alongside our manufacturing plants, where we have engineers, software developers working with us to co-create those smart manufacturing solutions. But I think if we could include more academia and government involvement earlier in the process, that would help us accelerate our work and allow us to develop and deploy even faster. And to Amy's point, we have some wins. We have our Strategic Innovation Fund, and that's certainly shown some success. But I think to really capitalize on those sorts of emerging opportunities, we need to expand programs like that. So we have, I'd say, a sharper focus on the commercialization piece and the scaling up piece of it, not the discovery element. I think Canada's very well positioned. We have all the right ingredients, great talent, critical minerals, strong academic base, the clean energy ecosystem that we're growing here. So I think there's a lot of potential just, maybe beyond my immediate auto manufacturing sector. And I think we need that coordinated action and that sense of urgency or need for speed. And that requires us to consider how we can better align the policies, the incentives and the opportunities for funding, and the partnerships so that we're a global leader in advanced manufacturing innovation. And I absolutely think that we could be. We talked a little bit today about geopolitical shifts and times of change and uncertainty. I do think there's sometimes a tendency then to become a little bit more risk averse when it comes to things like capital spend. But government support could really make a big difference in that and be a Kickstarter to some of the things that we know we need to be investing in. And we need to be willing to place those bets. And Amy, you hit on this as well, but just taking some chances and tolerating the risk of failure better together. Because when we're investing in R&D, we're not just building a better product or helping that particular industry or company, we're actually building a much more resilient and prosperous country for everybody.
If I can jump on that, it might come as a surprise to a lot of people tuning in today, but a steel industry, even if we're an old industry, if our processes haven't changed much over the last 4,000 years, our industry is investing a lot of money every year on R&D and CapEx.
Yep.
We're talking hundreds of millions, if it's not billion, every year to maintain operation, but also to innovate and be more productive and be better at what we're doing. And those investments are, ongoing in normal times. I'll put it that way. But what is really needed for industry to keep spending, whether it's R&D and CapEx, it's really, again, going back to predictability. It's having a clear understanding of government regulation, where they're going to go, whether we're talking about the carbon pricing, for instance, for our industry, but also in terms of trade protection or trade policy that we have. So the moment that we have a better understanding of what's the context and the environment we're in, we're going to make those spending decisions. But we need to have predictability and on the long run, because when you invest in a blast furnace in Canada, you know that this furnace will be used for the next 60 to 70 years, right? So you need predictability. You need to be to be sure of where you're going. So that goes back a little bit to what Jay was saying about an industrial policy in Canada. So if we're serious, and if the Canadian government is serious about having a steel industry for decades to come, and I really think that we need a steel industry for forever, well, then we can set up the right parameters and context and an environment for us to make the investment necessary to remain viable in an operation in the long run.
Just maybe I'll pick up and pull on that thread a little bit more since Francois raised it on sort of the regulatory environment. Governments often talk about regulation and red tape, and they introduce various initiatives to try to, respond to business concerns about this. But I think they consistently and constantly over time have fallen short of the mark, and all you have to do is look at the red tape counts and where red tape and regulatory burden rests among any survey of any industry, but including ours and of our members. And it consistently ranks as one of the top sort of irritants. And, even if, in some cases or some parts we might be overtaxed, that's a pretty straight line for companies to look at the tax level, what that means, and how that impacts investment decisions. The regulatory uncertainty in Canada is much harder and much more challenging for companies, especially small and medium-sized manufacturers, to sort of wrestle their way through. They don't have dedicated compliance officers. There's huge opportunity costs to going through these compliance processes when you would otherwise be, focusing on your employees or acquiring new customers. And if I were to offer sort of a specific critique that I think is going to be necessary when we talk about long-term changes, so much of what we see from governments is, well, tell us what the problematic regulation is, and we can work on fixing it. Or tell us what your top 5 are. And then government can spend, and it's good to do this exercise. They can spend 18 or 24 months or some extended amount of time reviewing this specific regulation, consulting with industry, trying to amend it, or even in some cases repeal it. Well, that's been happening. Dozens, hundreds of more regulations across all levels of government have been introduced, or new compliance mechanisms via legislation or ministerial guidance or departmental guidance have introduced. And so, the problem is when we think only about what specific regulation is a problem, we're not treating the underlying symptom or the underlying issue, which is how governments regulate in the first place. And so I think, a big push to creating investment certainty and incentives for our sector will be not just fixing some individual regulations, not just to strain a metaphor, not just, putting more air in the leaky tire, but actually trying to patch the hole in the tire. And for us, that means looking at things like the cost benefit analysis that underlines regulatory decisions. Often those are not fully informed by industry. They don't accurately reflect the real world cost benefit of doing these. I mean, I've been around Ottawa for once read a cost benefit analysis from a federal regulator that told us the cost was more than the benefit of a specific regulatory decision. Around ensuring that some of our regulators have economic mandates. You can be focused on health, safety, or any other objective and growing the Canadian economy. These are not mutually exclusive goals. However, some regulators will say to us directly, that's not my job. My job is not to worry or care about the long-term growth of the Canadian economy. And I think it's to bring some extra and additional scrutiny on these decisions. Regulatory policy is extraordinarily complex. It's not uncommon that there might only be a few dozen people within government and some industry experts outside of it that truly understand the impacts of some of these decisions. More scrutiny, expertise, time, and care needs to be put into how these decisions are made and when they're made. And I do think, and we hope, and at least at CME's part, we're spending a lot of time talking to governments about this because we think, the benefits would be enormous. It is hard work, but it is relatively low cost at a time when government budgets are getting thin, and it's getting harder to argue for top-ups to programs that we think are very important for our members and manufacturers. So I think that's one area that we hope governments and the federal government specifically will be able to focus more on here in the years ahead.
No, that's great. And we only have 2 questions in the chat right now. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time here. We should be moving on to the last question, but I wanted, because we're trying to make recommendations that are going to go back through the conference in Ottawa in November, I wanted to dig in just a little bit to get a little bit of perspective on shared risk. I think you've all talked about it in some way that, for our organizations, for our manufacturers in Canada to be more innovative, to invest more. There needs to be this shared risk framework. We've talked about SIF. We haven't talked about SHRED, but SHRED exists. There's also the global innovation clusters. There's what are the other mechanisms that your firms are looking for from the government in terms of shared risk? Because I know, especially with multinationals, you can make those investments in innovation and R&D essentially in any country in the world. So what's going to bring more of those investments that you're making into Canada? Amy.
So it's another way to come at the risk discussion. We're in an environment where our competitors are coming to Canada as well to service the Canadian market. And so we talk a lot about the advantages of Canadian headquartered companies that are innovative and intensive R&D. Companies like us, companies like others who are on the call. Understanding that there is a value, and this is just a perspective. I don't know if I would qualify it as shared risk, but just understanding that there is a difference between a Canadian headquartered intense company versus a foreign entity that comes and sets up shop. Where those decisions are made, where the intellectual property resides, where the employment happens, the innovative R&D happens, is really, really critical to productivity and to de-risking the business decision. So just even at that level, which is maybe 2 steps removed from actual risk, but understanding the value of Canadian headquartered innovation companies. I think we've seen a lot of let's go find others and bring them home and set them up in Canada, and that's all great and important, and especially in a global world. You can't diminish or stop that, but just understanding the productivity that comes from a Canadian headquartered company, and really helping us keep those companies here and helping us drive. Again, because I feel like I don't want to be cynical and I don't want to be negative. We are the beneficiary of a strong Canadian commitment to space. Our business was founded because Canada understood what space could do to communicate in this humongous country that we live. And so, and our customers, top of the list of our customer chain is the Canadian government, both the Canadian Space Agency, the Department of National Defense, and other departments that depend on space data and analytics to understand what's going on with climate change and a multitude of other things. So that's certainly appreciated. The other piece, and again, just to acknowledging where we do get support, so certainly SIF, I hadn't considered really other programs that Tara talked about, including helping companies scale up and feed growth and fund growth, because that's sometimes the point where great ideas are only so good. If you can't get them to the next level of scalability, then you kind of we do have government support for that incredible new manufacturing facility that we're finishing in Montreal right now. There is government of Quebec support into that. Our new Robotic Center of Excellence in Brampton, where we're building Canada Arm 3, had Government of Ontario support. And of course, we have the revenue support from our customer, the Canadian government, on multiple projects. So lots of things that we are sharing in terms of risk. But I did want to call out that Canadian headquartered piece, because I think it's sometimes with good intention to grow our economy and bring more in, we lose sight of the value of what is an organic Canadian headquartered innovative company.
Okay, thanks, Amy. I think Jay, you wanted to weigh in there, and then we'll move on to the last question.
Sure. So I'm far enough away from the policy side, from specific programs. I can't comment on the shared risks of sharing literally the same risks. I think there's another way to look at it as well, in addition to, not instead of, which is maybe there are different risks that business and government focus on. So, my company has to invest in R&D. We have to invest in making new products. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, right? That's a risk we assume. But we're all sitting here talking about how do we make Canada like a top world-class economy? And then we talked about some of the things in my laundry list, right? Like, the workforce, the automation, the new factories and everything, the infrastructure. all that. But you don't want to get to a catch-22 situation. You don't want to say, well, we can't grow the economy because we don't have the infrastructure, and we can't build the infrastructure because we don't have the economy. Like at some point, like a desire to really advance things is going to take a risk. It's going to take, wow, I'm going to invest in this and hope that it pays off, hope that industry meets me there. Obviously, we want to talk and not have to be, but you never really know. And so I think the encourage is we have to make these investments or we'll fail for sure. But the risk comes in, you don't 100% know if you make the investments that you're going to win. And so I think if we're going to run into trouble, I'd rather run into trouble through over ambition than under ambition, which I think is the risk that we sometimes see today.
Okay, thanks, Jay. That leads in nicely to our last question before we open it up to the floor. We're going to maybe start here with Ryan and then go around to Jay and Tara to look at what new opportunities or advantages should Canada exploit in this sector despite the challenging landscape. So we've sort of like come close to that, and I was thinking, Jay, when you were talking, about the nation building projects, is that kind of the infrastructure signal that we're looking for? And so maybe I'll just turn it over to Ryan first to give some perspective from a CME perspective nationally about opportunities and advantages. We talked a lot about challenges, but there's a lot of interesting things going on, and with every challenge comes an opportunity.
Yeah, I listen, I think there's so much opportunity for Canada when it comes to the future of our manufacturing sector. If the past several weeks, months, and even years looking back into COVID have reminded us of anything, this idea of a post-industrial service only economy is not only not sustainable, but it's not really resilient in the face of a changing geopolitical environment. So, a strong manufacturing base is going to be critical to our ability to navigate an uncertain world, ensure that we can provide Canadians with the things to live healthy and successful and fulfilling lives, and create a bunch of really good jobs alongside of it. And I mean, you're hearing from some companies today that are making those types of investments in Canada and see a strong, sustainable manufacturing future in this country. I think there's reason to be optimistic that governments get it. It might have taken sort of a shock from the South, but governments are talking about the future of manufacturing, the future of our economy, the need to incentivize investment in a way that feels more urgent and serious than it had in years past, when, I'll be blunt, sometimes it felt like our elected leaders were giving us lip service rather than really being intentional about sort of the policy environment. So when you layer in that combined with some of Canada's natural advantages when it comes to being a safe and sustainable democracy, having some of the world and labor standards, having multinational companies that are headquartered in Canada, having multinational companies that have large operations in Canada, having a well-educated workforce. I think it all lends itself to the next several decades turning into a real opportunity. And of course, lastly, our hope is that we can kind of solve and deal with our US problem, because it still is a tremendous advantage of us to be so deeply integrated and close to such an important market. And as we move from a free trade to a more managed trade system, our future clearly will have to lie within Fortress North America and how we can work with our neighbors to the south to do what we do best, which is build things together to compete with the rest of the world. And so, if we can get past this sort of short-term challenge with the South, and then dig in on some of what we've heard from everybody here today around some of the that are needed, some of the private sector risk taking that will be necessary, and how we can all sort of start moving in the right direction. I'm really optimistic that We're going to have more manufacturing firms. We're going to have more small firms that become more medium-sized firms, more mediums that become larges, and more larges that continue to keep Canada home as their base of operations. So I'm very bullish on the long-term opportunity.
That's great, Ryan. Thank you. Jay, do you have some thoughts here?
Absolutely. I'm really glad we're ending on this question, definitely, and on the positives here. So I think I can make a pretty good claim to being as optimistic as anyone about here, and that I chose Canada for my home. And I'm really, really excited that I've been here, the almost 9 years I've been here now. And I just have an incredibly bullish opinion. And I'd say that Canada has all of the ingredients needed to be a major industrial player and a global economic player if we actually commit to it. From a resources perspective, we have space to grow. We have natural to take advantage of and make sure we have a resilient and robust material supply chain. We have an educated and capable population. We have a strong history of being an industrial power that we can protect and expand. And we have a safety net that allows Canadians to take chances. Not just all Canadians can take chances, not just the most well-off. Entrepreneurship is a much less risky proposition here from a personal perspective. And that's just, kind of on the resources side. But as a country and society, I mean, Canada's just a great place, right? We have a very stable society and political system. We're high on every democracy index. We have a strong array of rights for men and for women, for citizens and for residents. In terms of selling our products competitively, particularly against low-cost competition, it's a real benefit that our government is not a coercive force on our businesses. This helps us create trust in our company's practices and policies around customer demands like data privacy, right, and information protection. We have a world-class education system. It's not as cheap as it once was, but it's way more affordable than other places. We have a universal healthcare system, has challenges, but it provides a baseline safety net for all our people. Housing prices and childcare are absolutely too costly, but far less expensive than any other well-known tech area I can think of. And taxes may be slightly higher than other well-known tech hubs, but the total cost of living balances out in favor of Canadians, not those other places. So we can pitch our stability, our lower total cost of living, and our easier path for introducing kids into adulthood. And that's what's going to attract working professionals with young children, and because those children are their primary concern. It's not about working to outdo Silicon Valley, what Silicon Valley does best, because that's a pretty hard pitch. But people want what's best for their families. If we sell the whole system, we can grow industry and economy both rapidly and sustainably.
Thanks, Jay. You make me proud to be a Canadian, and I think talk to Global Affairs about being a champion speaker for Canada. Bravo. Tara, you wanted
Jay,
to
if you could be our ambassador. So yes, just a few other comments. Absolutely agree to focus on our homegrown innovation. We have the talent here. We have a great ecosystem here. The Kitchener, Waterloo, GTA, that whole tech corridor. We've got a wealth of startups and just really talented local companies here in Ontario and across Canada. One thing we maybe haven't talked about yet is artificial intelligence. And, AI is redefining how we work and how we can stay competitive. And we definitely have that talent here in Canada. And I think we have a unique opportunity to really harness that technology, strengthen our operations, yes, but also elevate our global standing. In particular, I think really lends itself well to AI because we certainly have an abundance of data, and it's good labeled data that lends itself well to AI tools and applications. And, we're kind of closing out on a positive note. I did want to highlight that we are really strongly investing in our technology today. So we're already spending a lot of money on smart manufacturing. We're, using predictive analytics to catch equipment issues before they fail so we can avoid the downtime. I can't remember who mentioned collaborative robots, but we're, investing really heavily in cobots. 3D printing is allowing us to design and produce a lot of custom parts in-house, and AMRs or self-driving robots. Jay, that one's for you. yeah, we're investing heavily in that space as well. And it's not just about the technology, it's about staying competitive, creating great jobs here, and showcasing our Canadian innovation on that global stage, and continuing to be proactive while, being agile and reactive in the moment too, because it's this constantly changing landscape. But we're all in that together and aligning on that national innovation strategy, based on all the things that we know we do well and capitalizing on those strengths. I think together we've really got that bright future ahead of us.
Thanks, Tara. Would anybody else like to provide some comments before we move over to the guests? Okay, I think this time I'm going to call for the poll, the demographic poll. If everybody could just answer this, this is just to understand who the audience is. It's I'll answer it myself. Oh, hosts and panelists cannot vote. Sorry. I'm just seeing that now. So if everybody could just answer that. And Bipin, if you can let me know if we can move on to the Q&A. I would encourage the audience to post more questions in the Q&A. I'm just seeing two here right now. They're both interesting questions that we'll tackle together. Okay. So let's move over to the Q&A. So the first question I see here, how does the panel feel about incubators and accelerators having a role to help address the new era of innovation challenges in Canada? So I think we do have a fair number of incubators and accelerators. Does anybody have a perspective there of how they're helping address the new era of innovation? Are they working? Do we need more of them? Anybody have familiarity?
Well, maybe
Ryan?
I'll just jump in very quickly. So the short answer and the easy answer is yes, they are helping, and I think across our sector, of course, we have all sorts of different companies at different parts of their life cycle, and it's a sort of a long continuum. And I think what's really important as we think about some of our long-term objectives is for policymakers and researchers to dig deep on sort of where some of those bottlenecks or where some of the challenges are in the ecosystem, from the entrepreneur that wants to make a product and start something, to an SME that starts to scale or sell locally, to size business that wants to invest or start to export. And I think the incubators have, for a long time, played an important role in that ecosystem. And I think that the most important thing that policymakers can do is dig in and try to understand and answer the question, which I can't do. Do we need more? Is it sufficient? Is there some other way that academia and governments could be partnering or supporting a lot of these incubators? What are the respective strengths of each one in their communities, and is that replicable in different parts of the country? I think we could probably do a little bit better job of learning from them about what works and what doesn't, and trying to do more of the good stuff, as it were.
Amy?
Yeah, just to layer on to that, I spent the first part of my career, first couple decades, in the tech sector, and working in large multinationals, but surrounded by that ecosystem of small startups and accelerators and incubators. And the truth is, innovation, whether it's in a multinational or an incubator, it feeds each other. It's a self-feeding mechanism. And so absolutely, they're core to our competitiveness, I think, and to the advancement of innovation, whatever sector, whatever size of company you're in. The challenge, and I think where we could put some more focus, is really understanding from the business perspective what it's like for an incubator and accelerator. I think we see a lot of them tripping when it comes to commercialization. Great idea, world leading in the moment, but as we know, innovation moves fast, but can't get that first revenue, and therefore can't get the funding, therefore can't sustain, and then the market moves on. And so when we think about how do we support them, I think we really need to understand what it's like to be in an incubator or an accelerator and where the risks are for that business. I'm going to say more often than not, I see it because they can't get the revenue that they need to sustain operations. R&D is only good if you can sell it. And so, which is blunt and horrible thing to say, but I think we got to figure that out a bit better. It's not innovation for innovation's sake. It's innovation because you need to capitalize it and market it and monetize it. And so understanding that as, government, industry, associations together, understanding that journey. I would put innovators and accelerators and entrepreneurs that's the world that I don't know that we pay enough attention to.
Yeah, maybe actually, Rana, I agree with all that, Amy. And maybe one other thing I think specifically about sort of the future of the incubator system is, traditionally when, not those of you who might be part of or listening to this conversation, but generally the perception of manufacturing is the 3Ds, dark, dirty, and dangerous. But in fact, the future of manufacturing, when we try to project out what it might look like 5, 7, 10 years with the adoption of a lot of these new technologies, we are going to see a lot more service-based platforms. So you're going to see highly or more flexible operations that are more capital efficient. They're going to be powered by software and automation, driven by customized technology. And we're seeing the trends heading that way. And so I think you can also see an environment where there might be opportunities for some more manufacturing specific style incubators that are going to take advantage of this flexibility and these platforms in a way that is going to do some stuff that we probably can't even imagine at the moment, but I'm gonna, go on a limb and say it's gonna be pretty cool.
Great. I think I'll go with one more question. I think let's close out the panel today talking about skills. I think it's brought up many times, and Bonnie Douglas has raised the question here to the panel about labor skills gap in Canada and its impact to innovation. I think you've all touched on it. We've heard from Prime Minister about some investments coming around skills and innovation. I spent the last 3 years of my life leading Upskill Canada. I think we all know that our success is underpinned by the conditions here, of course, and the people to come, the innovative people to come and do the work, to be the innovators, to drive innovation, to produce products in more innovative ways, more efficiently, to deal with our productivity issue in Canada. So let's just spend a few of our last minutes talking about that and what you think, what do you want to leave today imparting in terms of insights and advice that can move on to Ottawa around the labor force and skills for our sector? Anybody?
Yeah,
I can jump in.
Okay.
So I'd never heard that 3D dark, dirty, and dangerous before.
Really?
That's my first time hearing that. So, and we talk a lot today about, the skill set and attracting the right talent to the industry. And if I wanted to impart one final thing is, manufacturing is wonderful. It's innovative, it's high tech. I've been in the industry, General Motors, for 25 years now, and I stay because I love it so much. So I think those are my parting words, is just to help us spread that message that this is an amazing industry to be a part of, and it may not be what you think it is.
Thanks, Tara. Anyone else before we close out?
Well, I'll just jump in very quickly on that sort of skills reference. I mean, it is so important because all the other things that we've talked about, about the potential for our sector and what it can mean, only becomes unlocked with the right people. I mean, manufacturing has lost, I can't remember the exact numbers, it's 30 or 40,000 jobs since the beginning of the year, largely driven by tariff impacts. However, that has happened. We still have a bunch of skill gap and shortages in the sector because, of course, it's not an exact plug and play from somebody who loses a job to another distinct need. And so I think it really has illustrated the strong need for, we think of policymakers reorienting our immigration system back towards something that's strongly driven by the types of new Canadians we need to fill very specific roles. When it comes to, again, how we overcome some of those 3D perceptions around attracting whether young Canadians or underrepresented groups like women into the manufacturing sector, and how we can look through various training and support programs to try to reskill, upskill, or plug some of these holes with recently employed and now manufacturing workers who are looking for another opportunity. We need to get faster and quicker at helping them adapt to new opportunities, because if we don't do that, it's going to delay modernization. It's going to slow our ability to adopt new technology. It weakens this R&D base we've talked about, and ultimately it means investment's going to go out elsewhere. So being focused on the people and the workers and the families and communities that their jobs support, I think is central to everything we want to achieve together.
Thanks, Ryan. I'm just going to wrap things up now. I want to first thank my panelists today. It was a really engaging conversation about a sector we're all very passionate about, and that's really important to the future of Canada. I think our conversation today really reinforces that advanced manufacturing is at the heart of Canada's future prosperity, and so we need to protect it. And we need to invest in it and invest in its growth and success. There are challenges. We've discussed many challenges, and there are opportunities. And I hope that a lot of that gets captured and moves forward to Ottawa to really build on some of these ideas. But just to kind of summarize, I think, we talked about a lot today, but, the big themes here were around workforce support, speed, shared risk, coordinated action. I think if we can get all of that right, and those aren't new things, but if we can get all that right, we will continue to prosper and succeed as a sector. And I believe that we have a government that wants to do that, that's bold and ambitious to support this sector in this moment. We're in a moment of crisis. It's deeply impacting this sector. And work with the government. Let's look at this collaborative approach to solve this problem and to foster these opportunities for Canada. So I believe that, I sat on the Industry Strategy Council, and we looked at like crosswalks and sectors, and, manufacturing is a sector, but it's also a crosswalk. It touches so many other sectors and how we add value to things. And so I don't think that this is just a sector. It's a cornerstone of our resilience, competitiveness, and sustainability. And I'll leave you with one sound bite. The message is clear here. If Canada invests boldly in skills, technology, and collaboration, advanced manufacturing won't just keep up with global change, it will lead it. So thank you for this engaging conversations, and I'll turn things back over to Murad to close the session. Murad?
Very much, Rhonda. That was fascinating. I also want to thank you lead at the end of the session very well. There is no more word to say. You said it beautifully, but I just want to thank all the panelists and all the participants on behalf of CSPC and all the volunteers who helped with this panel. And just remind you that the recording of the session will be posted on CSPC website, as well as the summary of the session, and reminding you that the annual Science Policy Conference, November 19th to 21st in Ottawa, will take place. The early bird deadline is October 1st. The first morning of the conference will be dedicated to one of the symposiums to innovation policy, and we'll further discuss these issues. But once again, thank you so very much, and wish you all the best.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Everyone.
Thank you.